you can have sex and not have any intimacy, but it's not healthy. It's not rich. It's not what you really want. So yeah, I would say before you even get to pleasure, start with examination and start with exploration. Start with getting curious about your sensuality. And I think that will help a lot.
Welcome back to She Cultivates podcast, a space where we cultivate our best selves and community. My name is Elizabeth Savillon, and thank you for joining me on another episode. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. All of that helps us to grow, and I love hearing your feedback. That helps us to know what kind of episodes, what guests you would like to see, and I just love hearing from you guys. Also, if you're in the Orlando area, we have our She Cultivates community, which is all about cultivating your personal community. And so when it comes to making friends, personal growth, just having people that are like-minded, like that is the place to be. And so we hope that you know that we have monthly events that we do every month, usually the third Saturday of the month. And that's a way also that you can engage with other people, meet people that are local, and stay in tune with all things She Cultivates. On today's episode, I am very excited because I have Janioris Rodriguez here, and she is an intimacy educator, and she talks really about confidence. She's someone that just makes taboo topics, I would say, not taboo. And you have a podcast as well.
I do.
And so I want to welcome you to the She Cultivates podcast.
Thank you so much. You have no idea how thrilled I am to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here, and just being able to see how our progression, right? Because I was on your podcast probably like a year, maybe more ago. Yes, in the beginning. So what got you into the work that you do today for those that don't know you?
Sure. So I always say that I help Christian women build body and bedroom confidence through boudoir photography and intimacy education, and also through our virtual communities and our online resources. So really virtually all over the world. And it all started because when I was getting married, I wanted to have a little spicy gift for my future husband. And I found it really difficult to find somebody with the rhetoric and the values that I held that also could offer a service like that and really tap into that sexiness, long-awaited time. And so I ended up not being able to find someone. So I basically stepped into the gap of what I was missing at that moment. And it's using all of my 20 plus years of photography experience and really adding it to the female experience and creating a space where you don't have to let go of your morals, your values, and the things that you hold the most dear in order to tap into this part of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And what type of photography were you doing before?
So I always say that when I was in high school, I always was putting together little shoots for my girlfriends. Like I was like planning their hair and makeup and doing all the shoots. So I feel like I've photographed everything. We won't talk about how long ago this was, but it was like darkroom days, you know, macro shots of flowers and like actually developing the film, you know. So I've been doing it a really long time, which means I've pretty much done every genre. And this is where I'm at home. I feel like really just understanding a woman, the way her body's built, our curves, our insecurities, and just our life experience. I feel like this is where I'm most at home.
Yes. And you do make women feel comfortable. And I love the shoot that you did. I think it was just like a few weeks ago that you did it with the women and just talking. Like, I feel like you make women feel like they can feel comfortable in their bodies, which I feel like growing up, I never felt like that. Like it was kind of like you were shamed into how you looked or in the church sometimes, which can we talk about that? About how we see ourselves? Like where do you feel like that came from for you?
Yeah, so we just did that International Women's Day shoot is what you're talking about. We were celebrating International Women's Day, and we had all kinds of colors and shapes and sizes and ages in the room. And I do think that this work helps you to see yourself from the outside in, right? Because when you're in these vulnerable positions, you don't really see yourself, except for with a critical eye. So this sort of helps you see yourself. Like you don't see yourself when you laugh and you get that crinkle in your nose, and like you don't see yourself when your tummy fills with air and you're cracking up and you're just, you don't see that. And so I tried to make space for us to really, through these photo shoots, where women can feel comfortable in their skin. And you're right that in the church or really in so many different circles, regardless of your background, context, or experience, there's been something, an attack, if you will, on women and their confidence. And I think that there's always been like a journey where we're going. Yeah. It's never about where we are. Yeah. It's always about like who you're going to be. Yeah. You have to get better. And I'm for that. Yes, you know?
For sure.
But, you know, it's always been like, because you're working on your next self, you don't get to be here right now in your current self. So sure, maybe I'm changing the way my body looks, but can I dress her today? You know, sure, I'm not, we're not where we want to be in our relationships, but can we start? Can we have the first date, if you will? So I think that these experiences have helped break through the next me and stay on the current me for now.
That's good. Wow, that's so good. Because we are always like fixated on like when I get there, you know, and it's like, wait, but we're in a part that we maybe once wanted to be in.
Yes.
Where we've come so far. Our body has brought us so far, you know, so it's like celebrating those little things. Yes. And I know like no matter what people have you know, maybe experienced within the church or not, like I think that there's just like a society pressure. And also I think it feeds our insecurity as women. It's like us being insecure is like better than like when women are confident about themselves and they feel good. It's kind of like, wait, now you're too much.
Yeah. You're
well,
too you have to think that there is a whole industry and a whole, not one industry, multiple industries that target our insecurities.
Yeah.
And that are marketing off of our insecurities and making money off of them.
Yes.
And so I think back to the story in the Bible, there was a woman, a young lady that was demon possessed, and when she was set free, she would tell the future. And then when she was set free, her slave master, basically, or her owner or her boss, was so upset that she was free. Because if she was free, she was no longer generating him money.
Yeah.
You know? And she was no longer being the fortune teller. Yeah. And that story reminds me of what we deal with as women overall. You know? We're making someone money, and our insecurities feed that.
Yeah.
And if we're free... we won't be able to feed that. You know, generally worldwide, women are the biggest consumers, the biggest purchasers, and the biggest decision makers. And so we feed off of the underbelly, and the enemy does that in the background, feeding on the underbelly of women and where they're softest, most vulnerable, and really attacking that for profit.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to your why of that, right? And you said that first, you know, you got into that because you didn't see that there was someone for that. But when it comes to doing that for Christian women, like, can you talk about what got you into that? Because I'm sure that you have personal experience with that.
Yeah. So the first boudoir shoot I ever did was for a friend. And, you know, she was married to her high school sweetheart, had a big family. And, you know, so she wanted to do a gift for her husband. And we were besties. She knew I had, you know, experience in photography. I had never done boudoir. So she asked me to do this. We did it. And she comes out in her outfit, right? And I mean... every girl knows the bodysuit, the infamous bodysuit. You wear it even out, right? You have a bodysuit on, and she had like a lace bodysuit, very normal. Nothing really was being revealed, if you will. And she came out whispering, and I'm thinking, what like
it was just you and her?
It was just us, and she was whispering at me, and I thought, you know, what? Like, what happened? Did something break? Like, is there what happened? And she said, I've never worn lingerie. I always thought it was a sin.
Yeah.
And that statement changed everything for me, because I said, if that's you, married to your high school sweetheart in a safe relationship with a big family, then there are so many other women like this too, that think that beautiful, healthy aspects of their sexuality, of their sensuality, of their bodies are sinful, are wrong. Don't tap into it. Don't think about it. Don't look that way. And they're not able to really enjoy the freedom and the delight and the pleasure in marriage within covenant that God ever intended. So I always say, as Christian women, if we believe that God designed and created this, we should be the experts.
Yes.
And that's not always the case.
No.
So when that statement came out from her in that trusted moment, I thought, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
And we need to step into this so that women can be free.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you don't feel that confidence like within yourself, but you're expected maybe in marriage, right? And I'm not married. And so when we were talking about this beforehand, it was kind of like, okay, I want to talk about this in a way of like singlehood, but also that leads to marriage and like how you can prep for that. And then women that are married that listen to this podcast, like there might be some mindsets behind that too, you know? Right. So I think that a huge part of that we were talking about is sensuality. Like, can you explain what that looks like as a person? It doesn't even matter your relationship status, right?
Right. And I love talking about this. I'm so glad we're going there. So sensuality and sexuality are two terms that are used interchangeably often, and they do feed into one another. We need one for the other, but they're not the same, right? So sexuality is important because every person has a sexuality, regardless of whether you are sexually active or you are expressing in that area, you're still a sexual being.
Yeah.
And then sensuality is basically just experiencing the world through your senses. So sensuality comes from senses. And so it's your sight and your touch and your, all the things. And when you experience life fully through your senses, you become more mindful, more aware, more explorative. You know, you can explore better, communicate better. You know your needs, your wants. And so as a single person and onto as a married person, being sure that you are a sensual woman is so valuable for when you are ready to be acting in your sexual self, you know? And even if you never do, being sensual is part of the rich tapestry of this world. God created us with all of these senses with the intention that we might use them, and we can for his glory. Even sensuality, the problem is that word has been sort of linked to sexual immorality, especially in biblical principles. So being sensual kind of makes it feel like the Jezebel and
like the
that forbidden, seductive woman. And I do think that we are using those terms incorrectly. Sensuality is really about experiencing life through your senses, knowing your likes, your dislikes, understanding your pleasure, your delight, your arousal. All of that is part of knowing you and becoming, as you talked about this recently on the podcast, becoming her.
Yeah.
What does it look like to really become her? Well, we can ignore our sexuality and our sensuality all day.
Yeah.
And some people do sometimes because they've experienced trauma or issues and that's fine for a season. Maybe you're sort of like, okay, I'll deal with that later.
Yeah.
But at some point, you do need to deal with it because it will leak into other areas of your life.
Yeah.
And whether you choose to ignore it or not, you are still a sensual, sexual being. And it's important that you're healthy in that area.
Yeah. And it's just being aware with yourself. I feel like that's so foundational. And people don't even sometimes want to go there because they're like, it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter what I feel. It's like, no, like that's a huge part. And I feel like as women, no matter how you were raised, like I feel like a lot of us have struggled with feeling like we have to be like the nice, the like, you know, fit in this mold and like, you know, all of that. But then that means that you're not setting boundaries, you're not speaking up for yourself. And I'm sure that leads even to deeper relationships, right? In the future and like all of that. So it's like, it doesn't, just because you deny or like, you know, you don't put, like you don't bring awareness to your needs, it doesn't mean that you don't have any. Exactly. And it's okay to have needs and wants and desires as a woman.
Yes, absolutely. Part of what we add to this world and the value that we add to this world stems from our passions and our desires. As Christian women specifically, those words like passions and desires and like they're just automatically linked to sexual sin.
Yeah.
Not even sexual expression, just sexual sin. And I think that God uses those passions and those desires, those characteristics, like you're saying, those wants and those needs to really integrate himself in our relationships with other people and in ourselves. And I think, like you're saying, just because you don't talk about it, you don't do it, you don't touch it, you don't discover it, doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
And truly, we are limiting, you know, the capacity for God to use us. Use us. When we say use us, we think ministry only.
Yeah.
Right? Like God can use me to reach people and expand his kingdom. Cool. But that starts at home.
Yeah.
So if you ever are going to be a wife or you're ever going to be in a relationship, you need to be able to expand the capacity for you to be of service to him, even in your marriage, in your relationship.
Yeah.
And even if no one saw that and that was just between you and your spouse, that is a form of ministry, and it's a form of God using you.
How has that journey been like for you? Like, have you always felt confident? Have you always felt like just in touch with yourself? Like, how was that process?
I think that confidence, to a degree, yes. I've always been a confident person, right? I mean, my mom is a very confident woman. And so she has really, and we don't ever even, we can even go there too about the impact of like, as women that we have on our children when we are confident, just like when you're joyful and peaceful. If you're a peaceful, joyful person, that radiates to your children, right? That confidence as a woman also radiates to your children, whether you have daughters or you have sons, you know, being confident. And part of that is embodying that femininity that God gave us. So my mom's always been confident.
Okay.
And that has definitely sort of radiated to me. I can't say that I'm always confident. That's not truthful. You know, our confidence fluctuates in life based on our experiences. And on any given day, heck, even your cycle will push and pull.
You're like, don't ask
your confidence,
anything.
You know? Like, you just look at yourself wildly different, even in your cycle. So your confidence fluctuates. But I think that inner dialogue of confidence has been present. And I do think that having that has really served me even outside of my sexual expression. Yeah. I do think that when you're talking about, you're saying, have you always been in touch with that
with
part
yourself,
of yourself?
Kind of like, just aware, I guess, of like, have you, did you ever feel like shameful about that? Or were you always in tune?
I think that when you talk about being in tune with yourself, I don't know if your listeners or viewers have ever had this experience. I had this experience before I became a mom where I felt like I'm not maternal. Like, how am I going to do that? I don't.
Like, you weren't like the person that had all the babies.
I was not that girl that was like rainbows, puppies, kittens. Not me, ever. And so I thought, oh my goodness, like, I'm going to step into motherhood and not be able to offer that to my child. And now somebody that meets me now as a mother would never believe that to be true, you know? And I think that being in tune with yourself is in that area of sensuality is a constant process, and it will see itself in its full expression once you're there, just like me as a mother now. But it does take little bits of work here and there to lead up to that. So as I'm preparing myself to become a mother, there are certain decisions, certain practices that I have to lead up to being that woman I want to be. Will I see it in its full expression? No. And that's okay because I'm not there yet, you know? And so I think that that's what has helped me, that even leading up to marriage and all of that, it's like, okay, I'm not in my full expression, but I need to start
do the things,
do the work to understand what are my likes, my dislikes, you know, to understand my body, to understand what's normal for me in my physical body, to understand my likes and dislikes in an explorative way, so that I am aware of how to communicate to my husband what my needs and my wants are. You know, there's a lot of blame to husbands and men about they don't know what they're doing. But do you know what you want?
Are you telling people what you like?
Are you vocal? Do you know what's happening in your body? Do you know what's normal for you? Do you know the proper names for your body parts? Do you approach it in a really
a weird way?
In a weird way that transmits, right? So I do think that that's part of the process. You just do little bits of work here and there to build that sensual woman. So when it's time to be proactive and communicate, you've already been curious. You can communicate because you've been curious.
And you're aware of like what your body needs and like what you, and I think also why I mentioned the shameful part is because of that. Like, I realize like a lot of our generation now is like talking about like teaching your kids like their body parts, like what they're actually called, not making them like, you know, these like names, like code words, or just like being like, you know, like we don't talk about that, you know, because I never had that conversation with my parents, you know, about like sex, about my body, like certain, even the stages of like my period, like as a woman, I feel like it was just always like, no, like, you know, like you just
you'll get there, you'll
go.
learn it eventually.
Yeah, but you're like,
yeah.
Who do I talk to this about? And then you
Right.
talk to your friends about it. You talk to their experiences. And so I feel like in the church, or the women that you talk to, like, what do you feel like are like maybe the myths or things that they carry with them?
Yes.
From the mindset about their body, about sex, and all of that.
Yeah. So when I was getting married,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you get, I mean, you get this whether you're getting married or not.
Mm-hmm.
The wave of unsolicited advice. Yeah. Everybody has something to add to
They're
the
the
pot.
experts.
Oh, everyone's the expert at that point, right? So
Yeah.
in the church specifically, there's no conversation about sex.
Yeah.
It's not talked about anywhere, not even a women's conference, right? There's no discussion about it. Everything is hush hush. You'll figure it out when you get there. But then all of a sudden, in the like 3 months before you get married, you get bombarded with all kinds of sour advice, is what I would call it, you know? And I got one piece of advice that I talk about often on my socials, if you follow me. And I was getting married, and she said to me, well, hey, as long as you are always available for your husband, then you have nothing to worry about. And that's the kind of information that we get, if at all, from good Christian wives. Yeah. Right? And I thought, always. Always means there's no room for margin. There's no room for my physical needs, my emotional needs. That there's no, just always. What I want and need doesn't matter. Available. Available means that I only respond to his desire, and I don't have desire of my own. Yeah. You know? Which leads to a lot of misconceptions with women when there's a lot of women with higher drives. Yeah. You know? And then they start to feel like, am I broken? Is something wrong? Why do I want sex more than he does? Or why doesn't he want me all the time like all the other men, and all the common myth? You know? And then just this if-then statement at all of like, if you do this, then that will happen. And we cannot make these bargain statements, because it leads to so much disillusion in the church and disillusion with God when things don't pan out the way you thought. And it happens,
like
even
your wedding
inside
night,
the church.
like magical.
Oh my gosh,
like
your wedding night, or just your whole wedding, or your whole marriage in general, and his choices. So now you've made me responsible for his decisions and his actions. And if something were to happen, God forbid, no one goes into marriage hoping it will end or crash or that something will happen. But if there's unfaithfulness, for example, in the marriage, I had to have done something differently. I should have been more available. I should have been more responsive. I should have. Then it's all me. And I carry the burden for choices that he made, for example. Right? Or vice versa. But in this case, we're talking about women. Yeah. And so that's the kind of advice that you hear. Just be available. Just respond. What you need doesn't matter. Like you were mentioning, you lay yourself down because you serve, and so you're last. Yeah. And that's fine. You know, in scripture, it does talk about considering others more highly than you, and all these verses that can be taken out of context about submission and other things. But the truth is that our husbands are to love us like Christ loved the church, and that we submit mutually to one another, and that sex was created even by the anatomy of it. I can tell you that God knew what he was doing, and he was way okay with pleasure just by the way women are created, you know? And so those things matter, and they're in complete opposition to what you're hearing from the wise women in the church, from the good Christian wives, from the wives that have been married for many, many years. And you think, well, goodness, if they've been married for 30, 40, 50 years, you know.
They might know a few things.
They know what they're doing, so I guess this is what I'll do. Yeah. You know, and I guess there's no access to women in other ways of mentorship. Because you can be mentored for just about anything these days, but there's no mentorship in that area.
And so your work is important of what you do.
I hope
and
so.
The education, because that gives women like a healthier way to see it, you know? And I know a few, like probably like 2 years ago, I had a conversation with someone about like purity culture and kind of how we saw that. And I found out during that conversation that a lot of women during sex are, it's painful for them. Yes. You know, some women never orgasm. If I can even, I don't know if gonna get filtered, but like all these things that women can go through, right? And so it's like it's such an important conversation that's not spoken about just in the church circles, but just in general. And so I think it's great seeing it from a healthy way, because how has the work that you've done helped other women now, right, see their selves or see their relationships as something where it's like they're cultivating that like fun, you know, within sex and all of that?
Yeah, well, it's true what you say. Research does show that within religious circles specifically, there are a lot of women that struggle with sexual dysfunctions, or even because they never even touch or feel or know what their norm is, so they can't catch illnesses or diseases or things that are not normal. They don't know that it's not normal. It might be common, but they don't know that it's not normal, you know? So it's true, especially within religious circles, the research shows that there's more vaginismus, like you're talking about the pain and all these other things. That's very true. And I'm hoping with my work that I add to the pot of the few but bold and amazing educators that are out there. They come from so many different perspectives, you know, from science-based and from academic research and from biblical perspectives. There are so many educators out there now that that was not a thing.
Yes.
That we can access with visuals and with video and with coaching and mentorship. And so I'm hoping that my work adds to that pot of people who have access to a different kind of education, that they don't have to go into the World Wide Web of crazy Google searches, or AI, and hope to learn something from there, or that all of their sexual knowledge comes from like porn, which goodness, we don't take any other tips from movies of any kind. So I have no idea why we've thought we can get anything
educational. Because there's nothing out there. So then people get curious. So they're like, okay, so that's what people like. And it's like, no.
Most of the time,
no.
99.999.
Yeah, but then that leads to like a lot of stuff for women, especially like that they're experiencing things that they're like, wait, this is not pleasurable, you know? And this is like through people that I've like read and heard and like just kind of being like, wow, like we're really missing that, you know?
Or they're taught that this is supposed to feel pleasurable to you, or this is supposed to feel good. And so they just, like we do with other things. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Have you ever thought, I have to go to the bathroom, but I'll go later?
Yes.
Yeah. And you kind of ignore that for a minute, and then it's been hours and you're like, oh yeah, I had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So we're very good about putting down what our body's telling us and what we think. And so when we are fed these kind of messages of like, this is what's supposed to feel good. You're supposed to be turned on by this. This is supposed to feel arousing to you. This is fine. Then what happens is we don't know what's healthy, because we don't have like a basis of understanding of what is good or healthy. We're not taught that it's allowed to be communicated. Maybe even within the marriage, there's difficulty communicating these things. So we do it, but we don't talk about it. And then you just go on having this sexual experience that doesn't feel safe, or that doesn't feel welcoming or arousing or exciting. And so slowly but surely you drift away from one another sexually. It impacts all the other intimacies that you share, and you don't know why your marriage has fallen apart. But it started in this place of people tell you, you're being informed of what you should like or not like, and you haven't done the work of understanding, what do I like? What does feel good? What is normal to me?
And what have you found then within like couples, you know, for marriages, right? Like maybe like when people say like postpartum, right? And different things that you go through as a woman, like, and you can speak from that experience, is like, does that change your sex life?
100%. Yes.
And that's normal.
And that's the thing. Yes, it does.
And
that's okay. I don't know of any other area in our life that doesn't change or develop or grow or stretch or shrink, right? And so I think if you're navigating things like postpartum, perimenopause, menopause, or any other dysfunctions, or, you know, even career shifts or things like that, I think it's important to go back and sort of define sex. What is sex for you? Especially within the church, there's been a lot of conversation about what sex is and how it's basically leading back to penetration. And that's the only thing that counts as sex. And then other things don't count. And so you think you're distant sexually or that your sex life has taken a hit. But the truth is that you have defined sex in a very limited way. And so when you're going through certain changes, especially changes that are not forever, right?
Yeah.
So
like
seasonal changes.
And they're big changes.
They're big
your hormones,
and they
your
last
body.
any number of, months or time, right? But that you can redefine sex for you and then also expand its definition for your sake to be really aware of what your needs are.
Yeah.
Maybe my needs have changed now. Maybe now, in order for me to come to a place where I can really be enjoying myself, I have different needs in terms of foreplay.
Yeah.
Or I have different needs, like maybe I need tools or resources or things that come outside. Maybe I need lubrication where I didn't before. Or maybe we can introduce other things into the bedroom within the bounds of both of our comfort levels that helps expand the definition of sex for us. And I think that there's a lot of help. Obviously, when it comes to dysfunctions, you can get help and come out of those dysfunctions. But when it comes to just normal seasons of life, understand that sex can look differently. It's meant to change and shift. And you can expand that definition to suit your needs. It doesn't have to look a certain way. Like people are so concerned about what size things should be or how long things should last or how often it should happen or what. There are no rules for your marriage bed. Be free to explore what that looks like for you and your spouse in your season of life. And then get creative and get explorative and get curious and then communicate those margins and those boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's helpful for someone listening because I think that also goes back to like how you saw it before, right? And then that I feel like would help you throughout your marriage, like on communicating those things. And I know you also have your line, your lingerie line that you draw. What brought you into that world of like?
It's always kind of been in the back of my head. The dream is to have the boutique and the studio in one place.
Which you have.
The studio right now. So we're just, going baby steps.
Yes.
But I think that, again, the line is sort of like the liaison, the bridge for some women, like stepping in, because we all wear bras and underwear.
Yes,
we do. So
yes.
It might be a matter of like helping you expand and look at your undergarments in a new way. And I always preach, my girls know that I always say, wear lingerie under your normal clothes, under your scrubs, under your, wear it like a super suit. Feel nobody knows that Wonder Woman's under there, even if no one sees it. Whatever comes outside of the norms of your normal undergarments, do it every once in a while. And there's so many ways to explore, like different textiles and different silhouettes, and do it for you. And see how your posture changes when you have a bra that fits properly. And when you have underwear that's comfortable, but it's like you have this little hidden superpower. And I think that the lingerie line has brought sort of a bridge for me to be able to reach audiences that have a hard time diving deep into these topics. But they wear bras and underwear. So we can
like everyone needs one.
Yeah, you need one. So let me push a little bit and just create a space for you to explore other options. And so that's been really fun.
I love it. I sent it to our team that I was like, oh my God, I would love maybe for our next event to have you there.
It's happening.
Because I'm like, I think that that's a really big taboo thing, right? And it's like we all need it. And it's so I don't even think I was wearing the right bra size for like most of my life.
Most women. Oh my gosh, most women.
Like, wow, it's supposed to not fit like this.
Right. Oh my gosh, nothing's digging into my side.
Yes. Like, and then honestly, I don't know if it's a thing, but I feel like also laundry or undergarments fit better than swimsuits. Is that a thing?
I don't know.
Like, I don't know. I feel like it even feels for me. I'm like, I feel more comfortable.
Yeah. I just jump in my underwear.
I know. Here we are. But no, I love that because it is giving women kind of like their power back. I feel like through that and just feeling like comfortable and confident within themselves. Yeah. And what has been kind of like the way that people see themselves, when it comes to this conversation, like, hey, I've never thought about these areas of my life. It's still taboo, you know, for me. Like, what advice would you give to someone in that space?
I would say start small, you know, start with digging into your sensuality first. And like, I offer a sensual woman journal, right? And the whole premise behind it is that you just are more mindful and aware of different things, like we were talking about different fabrics that touch your skin. Like before you even, especially if you are single, this is a great time to tap in your sensuality, because I need to know that lace is itchy and I hate it. Like before I get there, do you know? Like I need to know that I hate floral scents and they drive me crazy and give me allergies. And that's all I can think about if I smell florals. Like that's all I can smell. Yeah. You know, I need to know that I love warm light, not cool light. I need to know that, you know, like this is all. So I try to probe women, especially who are getting curious about this area of their lives or who want to improve in this area. They feel like it's just been dusty in a corner for a while. Yeah. Just start with your senses. Go just one of your senses a day, and think of something that you can do to sort of focus in on that alone, right? Okay. Like today, I'm just going to taste something delectable and I'm going to eat it without shame about what it's going to do, like where is it gonna sit? Is it gonna sit on my hips? There's too many calories. I'm just gonna enjoy food and something delectable, even if it was just one bite of something really delicious. And I'm going to focus on the flavors and what it tastes like and what I like. Do I know? If everybody tells you that they like sweets and desserts, maybe you don't. You know, maybe you're not a sweet tooth. Do you know that you don't like dessert? Do you know that you prefer, you know, sour things or salty things? Whatever, you know. And I think that is super important and will do a lot to help advance you and help you get curious. Dance to a song like that makes you feel powerful or sensual and like for yourself. Yeah. You know, just what would it look like if you were showering with water that was hotter or colder than usual, just to get you off of that zombie mode we get in a shower, and you're just like zoning out. You know, so that you can actually feel the water on your skin. What would it look like to do all these things? And I think that when you get practical and tactical about your senses, you can start to become aware of my likes and my dislikes. Yeah, I think that the taboo is that, you know, self-pleasure should not be allowed, and it's a sin. We're not talking about self-pleasure, even though it is a delightful thing to enjoy something for yourself. Yeah. We're talking about self-exploration, self-examination. That's another place where you can start. If you're thinking, I have never dove into these topics and I feel super awkward and uncomfortable dancing to songs and turning on candles, fine.
Like that's not the way for
you.
You?
Yeah. Start with a very clinical approach, self-examination. What does your body look like? Have you had a handheld mirror and looked? Yeah. You know? Because when things get lighter or darker or stiffer or drier and you don't know because you've been taught don't touch, don't feel. Yeah. So start then with self-examination and just understand what the norm is for what your body looks like. You know, now after so many years of women dealing with cancers and things, we've been encouraged to do our own self-examinations. But if you are constantly aware of what your body looks like, you seemingly would have less probability for these diseases and illnesses to get so far ahead before you're able to notice them, you know? So yeah, I would say before you even get to pleasure, start with examination and start with exploration. Start with getting curious about your sensuality, and I think that will help a lot.
That's so good. And I love how practical that is, because that's stuff that we can do and we can try and be like, oh, like I didn't know that I like that. Yeah. Or that smell. Right. Like, because I feel like, yes, it does. Or how that feels, like different things. And for someone that's married, what has helped you within your relationship, your over time that you're with a partner, right? That people, like how you said, like trying different things, like what has that looked like to you to have like a healthy way of like intimacy, confidence? How would that look like?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I love doing with my husband are walk and talks, and they sound super basic, super like, oh, that's your advice. listen. Men specifically do really well with shoulder to shoulder activity. So when women get together, we're eye to eye.
Yeah.
We're touching each other. We're like, connective
engaged,
in that way, right? When men connect, you notice they go fishing or they go watch a movie. Like, you spend time together.
And they're like, "That's my best friend."
They're
like, what do they say?
They feel super connected, right? You ask them about, well, what happened? They got laid off. I don't know. I didn't ask.
I didn't ask.
I don't know.
Okay,
what do you mean you didn't ask?
Yeah.
Right? But men do really well in those like side by side friendship feeling connections.
Yeah.
That's why girls will say, "Oh, well, I'm just wasting my time with he just wants me to sit with him and watch this show." Like, and I'm on my phone and it's super boring, or to watch the game. That is his way to connect. It's his way to feel bonded to you. Yeah. Especially as a friend. And we all know that, and if you don't know, now you know, that sexual intimacy, it starts with other kinds of intimacies. You can have sex and not have any intimacy, but it's not healthy. It's not rich. It's not what you really want. Yeah. So these other intimacies matter a ton in order to develop healthy sex. And so when you're married, it's really easy to get into logistics mode. Like, who's picking up the kids? Who's doing this? When are we going to that? Do you have that meeting? That's it. And that's the conversation. Yeah. So I think if you're married and you're looking to really expand that, I would definitely say grow in your friendship, in your like side-by-side moments. And for us, we do walk and talks, which just is what it sounds like. We walk and we talk, and that helps because it's not as intimidating to do this like eye to eye thing, especially about vulnerable topics. It's public in the sense that we're outside, so nothing's gonna get weird. Especially if you're single and you want to, or if you're dating or engaged and you want to have these conversations, but you don't want to put yourself in these weird positions where you're like, wow, talking about this is doing something to me. Go on a walk in Blaine daylight and talk about it. Like, we're just gonna walk. It exerts energy. You're able to walk. It keeps you active. It keeps you off of your phone, off of other things and other distractions. So you're doing something. Yeah. But you can also focus strictly on the conversation. So having those conversations often, I know it sounds basic, but communication is so essential outside of the bedroom. So have these conversations not in the bedroom. Don't debrief them like right after it happened. And say,
like analysis.
Yeah, like let's not do that. That's super awkward. And they may not say it, but men do feel subconscious about those things too. So debrief in other ways, in casual ways, and have that conversation in friendship. That's good. And I do think that communication, if you feel like, wow, like talking is a strength, but not for me, like there are other ways. What if you wrote a letter? What if you like just wrote it out? Women love journaling. They love writing. What if you just wrote it? Yeah, we love to talk. And maybe that it could be overwhelming to some men. Like, wow, this is a lot, Maybe write it out, or you can use resources or guides are available out there sometimes with questions that you can ask. And it's more like a game. Yeah. And so it's less intimidating. And then you don't have to be the one to initiate the questions. It's just the game said to ask you this.
Or like I've also seen the one that you like do blindfolded, like certain things like for senses. Yeah. For couples. Is that a thing?
That is a thing.
Okay.
Of course. There's really, there are not as many rules as people want there to be. Yeah. Surrounding intimacy, especially within marriage, like be free with that person, be, yes, sex is the most vulnerable act probably that you can have with a human. But if you're feeding all the other intimacies, if you have recreation, if you, and it's not just always business. I know some women talk about like, oh, well, I'm just so tired and I don't have enough domestic help, around the house. So I don't want to connect in that way. And so I think sometimes it's having those communications, having schedules, having like, there's so much taboo around like sex that's scheduled. Like you just want it to be spontaneous and movie-like. Again, we don't take our cues from movies, like
that is not the best example.
Like I've never seen a movie where they shower after sex. Don't take your cues from movies. They don't go to the bathroom. I don't see them go, right? So like don't take your cues from movies. It's okay for your sex to be scheduled. Schedule doesn't have to feel rigid. That doesn't mean it's not fun. It actually for women might be really helpful because it builds anticipation.
And like mentally,
yes,
you can be
mentally
like
you can get there, right? Which is another reason why I talk about lingerie, because women say, well, it's just gonna end up on the floor in 2 minutes, or he doesn't care about lingerie. Yeah, but you do. It helps you mentally get there. It helps you kind of take off the mom role or the work role or whatever and put on your sexy wife mode. And that does a lot for us mentally.
Gotcha.
So
and it starts in the mind.
100%.
A lot of that is in the mind.
Yes.
So for those women, like how you said that, do feel the flow, like the everyday, like, you know, routines and schedules, like that makes sense. It's like trying to like kind of break that. And
how do I
okay,
transition so that I'm not thinking of my to-do list?
Yeah, because you're like, I have to go watch this.
Literally during sex. Like women are like this. So like, how do I transition? Give yourself the time. That's why scheduled sex is so great for women, you know, because you have nothing else. Now you've respected that time in your calendar, and you have said, well, if I keep all of my commitments to everything else, I can keep my commitment to this. And obviously it's flexible. If you get there at that point and you're like, actually, this is a really bad time, or this is where we're at mentally or emotionally, there's flexibility in that, obviously. But it gives you a head start.
Yeah. And that's helpful to know that you can do that. Because I think, I think in how I'm not married yet, right? It's like those things of like, wait, you schedule it? Like you do this, you know? But it's good to know. Like those are the things that you should talk to your partner about. Like even expectations, like before you get married, of like, what do you expect out of sex? How often?
Talk about it. Yes. Please talk about it.
Yes.
You know, because then you get to your marriage bed and you didn't know this person had felt negatively about this act or this thing, you know, or they felt self-conscious about this area, that area.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea that I would want the lights always off. I never want the lights on. Why not? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, let's go there. Do you know? Or like that you feel self-conscious, or that you're not sure how you feel about oral sex or about other things. You know, like, let's talk about those things. And there are ways to talk about it. Obviously, don't talk about it on a date night. Like on the couch after a movie.
Yeah.
Let's be wise.
Don't set yourself up.
Don't be, let's be wise about it. But there is
sure.
definitely room to have the conversations, and you absolutely should.
Yeah.
Like, you know, about frequency, about drive, you know, about, there's a way to respect the privacy that you're still holding on to, especially if you're waiting or holding off until marriage, while still having the conversations, especially about expectations. Yes. They really matter a lot. About initiation, about gender roles. Like, well, how do you feel about me initiating versus you initiating? You know, all of those things can be chatted about before, and they'll change. Like we talked about in different seasons of life, your drive will fluctuate, you know, your desires will change. Maybe I no longer love that. That was really exciting at first, but now it's not. And that's why that constant communication, and it's the reason, obviously, why sex within marriages should be even better. Yeah. Because you have that continuous conversation and that change with that person where intimacy is growing in other ways.
Yeah. And I think for single women that are listening, I know I've talked to a few people that it's like, you know, with hookup culture, like everybody, right? Like it's like that's such a normal thing within church and without. But that doesn't build intimacy. Right. And I feel like that's not ultimately like what we desire. Like that connection of someone knowing you and being like, what do you need? And like, which is in marriage, you know, and in a healthy marriage, right? So it's like, that's something that can feel sometimes discouraging for single women that are maybe listening to be like, dang, like, you know, how is, but but at the same time, it's like, imagine that where you can already know your body, understand yourself, set those expectations so that when you're dating, you talk about those things. And then also when you get there for marriage, it's like you evolve and change and you're able to have these conversations even about your trauma. There's sexual trauma that's there.
Absolutely.
Like having those deeper moments where you feel like seen and heard and just, it's so much, it's what God intended because God made sex. It's supposed to be great.
It's good. Yes. And it can be great. And there's still room for it to be great. Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking it's never been great, it's never too late. There are other things that you can do to really start working on yourself, whether your partner is willing or able to work on it with you right now, just like you would with therapy. Yeah. Right? Start with you. And what can I do to be more in tune with myself? How can I understand my body better? How can I know what I like and dislike? How can I communicate it in a way that it's, you know, keeps our guard down? And I do think that sex is a beautiful, sacred, holy thing. It mirrors so much of our relationship with God. And if that feels weird to you, let's start there. Because if you're a believer and it feels like God and sex are in two separate compartments and like your sexual expression is not related to your relationship with God, let's start there, because sex is this mysterious mirror to our relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so start with the definition of that and the meaning behind it and the intention that God had with it, and the beauty that it's supposed to hold. And really, like, sexually excellent marriages, like they wage war against the enemy, because when a couple can't be divided in this area and they're bonded and united as one the way God intended, like the enemy has no room to wage war against that couple. And I mean, imagine the excellence that you bring to the marriage bed when you're ready. If you, just like you're working on all these other areas of yourself, you know, if you're working on your body, if you're working on your mind, if you're working on your self-care and all these other things, you go to therapy, you need to work on this too, because imagine the excellence that you're going to bring to your relationship when you do.
I love that. And yeah, I think that that's why this conversation was important, because I'm like, it is about cultivating your best self in all the areas.
Yes.
And you're doing the things that are in your control with your capacity. And I think there's an important part of our life that we can't just like put aside, like, oh, like, no, because we're sexual beings, you know? So it's like, as women, being empowered by it, you know, not ashamed, feeling like a wholeness, and like getting curious. I like how you said that, exploration of what you might need to change, to look into, maybe ask like women around you too.
Yes, absolutely. Like, girls, we love to talk. We love to talk. And although, to be fair, some of the conversation about sexual experience is not always honest.
Yes.
You know, but it goes back to like cultivating your circle.
Yes.
Knowing the circle that you're in.
So
whether you're single or you're married. If you're married, like, cultivate your circle, that even if you have single women in your circle, you know, that's fine. If you have married women in your circle, like, that you don't have married women that are bashing men and bashing marriage and that are unsatisfied, you know, and then that's feeding into you. You believe that to be true, and you have this vendetta against men, and why that's not your experience. Right. So guard your circle, and then have those conversations and make sure that they're honest, because in those conversations about sex, there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of blame placing, like we talked about earlier, like, he doesn't know anything, he doesn't know what he's doing, he can't find whatever. He doesn't know, right? But let's make sure you know. Let's make sure you know, and that you're communicating in a way that's clear. We're all humans trying to adjust to one another, two different worlds that collide to become one, especially in marriage. So be flexible in that vulnerability, and have the expectation of growth, that it all won't happen overnight, not in your that first night of marriage, not in that first month of marriage, maybe not in that first year of marriage. It's supposed to grow and expand, just like your love grows and expands, just like other parts of that relationship grows and expands. So have those conversations, make sure that they're honest, with a circle that is for the same values that you have. And that it's less about ego and who's better at sex. And it's less about placing blame, like, whose fault is it that it's not good? And let's get introspective and understand what we add.
And what we can control, we can change, and all of that. I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation. And I know that you have helped someone that's listening that maybe hasn't ever heard this conversation in their life, where they're like, wow, what did I just listen to? But it's like, I just hope that it leaves you curious and feeling empowered, right? Absolutely. To feel confident, to feel that we all as women have these desires and needs and everything, and like, it can be beautiful. It doesn't have to be shameful. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And before we wrap up, how can people connect with you? The amazing things that you're doing this year with your conference. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So you can, the hub for everything is at janioris.com. You can find me on socials at Fem by Janioris. And yes, we do have a conference called Noir Night that happens in October, where we talk about all these taboo topics, about pelvic health and gut health and motherhood and all the things, and just bringing those topics from darkness into light. So that's coming up, Noir Night Conference. And you can find me there and learn about an experience with me, learn about coaching with me, learn about the lingerie line, start there, look at the Sensual Woman Challenge in the journal. There's a lot of resources available there.
I love that. Thank you so much for being a
Thank
part.
you.
And I will put all her information down in the show notes below. I really feel like if you got something out of this, make sure to tag us on social media. Let your girls know, because this is something that we should all be talking about. And maybe that can be a conversation that you have at the dinner table at a girls' night, and be like, hey, like, let's talk about this topic, because I have maybe never talked about this, and hopefully you find a safe space, like how she said, and just feeling comfortable and confident with yourself. So thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode, and I will see you guys next week.